at BetaWorks. Hi, Matt.
Thank you. So we have a really good set of panelists today, and to start off, they're going to talk for a few minutes about each of their platforms. My name is Matt Hartman, and I am at BetaWorks. We are a startup studio and venture capital fund, meaning we build companies and we also make seed stage investments in outside companies. And for the last 3.5 years, voice has been a key part of an area of focus for us. So we were seed investors in Gimlet Media and in Anchor, and we ran last summer an accelerator called VoiceCamp, where we made pre-seed investments in eight companies, all building in voice user interfaces. So I'm really excited to have this set of people. So to start off with, Naomi Makofsky from Google is going to come talk about the Google Assistant and also the voice components of Google.
Hello, everyone. It is nice and bright up here. So as Matt said, my name is Naomi Makofsky, and I work on the Google Assistant. And just quick show of hands, how many of you engage with a digital assistant? This is the only way I can see you. Okay, and how many of you work for companies that are starting to think about voice and what this means for your business? Okay, cool. This is green. This is great. So at Google, we announced the Google Assistant about 1.5 years ago. We announced it to be a conversation between the user and Google that helps users get things done. I'm sure we'll spend some time on the panel talking a little bit more about what that means and on the surfaces in which this lives and the use cases with which users can interact with it. But I want to take a little bit of a step back and talk about why we're talking about conversation in the first place. So users turn to their devices for more than just information retrieval. And they turn to their devices every time you want to know something, do something, go somewhere, eat something, expecting, again, not just this information, but for actions, and it enables you to get from point A to point B, make that reservation, send that message to mom, and everything in between. We turn to our devices more frequently, but across shorter durations. So it's not just when you're at your desk trying to get some emails written, but it's when you're waiting for the subway, you're picking your kids up from soccer. And there are these different contexts with which you are now trying to achieve those same actions or take those same actions, right? So context is key here. When you're washing your hands, when you're doing the dishes, when you're playing with your kids, you don't have the hands to then turn to your device to answer the question that just popped into your head. So you rely on voice. Same thing happens in the morning, for me at least. My alarm goes off at 6:30. The last thing I want to do is open my eyes. Maybe some of you can relate. So I lay there and I say, hey, Google, tell me about my day. And I get my commute update, I get a weather update, and I get my news briefing. All of this, again, done via voice, so I don't have to open my eyes and can keep them shut for about 22 more seconds. So we see this concept of voice entering the picture to help us get things done more efficiently. We're turning to these digital assistants in that exact same way. And it's this really interesting shift towards digital assistants, towards assistive AI. We're going to start to talk a lot more about this concept of artificial intelligence. And we're going to see this start to change entire industries, products, change the way that we start to go about our days. So I'm going to hand this back over to Matt. Very excited for this panel and hope we get to dive into some really juicy questions.
Thanks, Naomi. So next we have Omar Tawakol, and he's going to talk a bit about the new product that he's working on.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Omar Tawakol. I used to run the Oracle Data Cloud in a company called Blue Kite, and this year we created Voicera, which is an in-meeting AI assistant that I'll talk about. But first I'm going to start with a question. What do you think is the most adopted form of collaboration in the enterprise? Any takers in the audience? Email. That's kind of an obvious one. Other people might say stuff like Slack and so on. And what's really interesting about email is enterprise applications have been for years pushing content into email, like with notifications and so on. What's happened in the last couple of years is the opposite direction started to occur. People started to build hooks out of email into enterprise applications because of the valuable information there. I'm actually going to say it's not email. It's meetings. That's where you spend a huge amount of your time creating actions and decisions and discussing with people what's going on. And you go from meeting to meeting to meeting So you rarely have enough time to actually go out and take all those actions and decisions and act on them and push them into the enterprise systems, like Jira and Trello and such, because you don't have enough time to do that. And so the interesting thing about the meeting is it's completely disconnected from your workflow, yet it has all this great information value. And that means it's a wonderful white space, a place where we really need to solve it so you can go into a meeting and come out and immediately impact your systems. But the problem with meetings is this is what people think about them. They just think they suck because they spend so much time and they just don't get enough out of it. And there's so many of these meetings, like 9 billion of them in the United States in a year alone with great financial impact. So what we've done is created an in-meeting AI assistant called EVA, Enterprise Voice AI. And the goal of it is really simple, for you to focus on the people and focus on the conversation. Because if you think about what happens in a meeting where people have their laptop open, they have the laptop open, supposedly taking notes, but then they see this email notification, a Slack notification, a text notification, and literally their brain gets 20 IQ points dumber as they're multitasking. So the whole point here is you just add EVA to the calendar invite. EVA figures out how to dial in, dials in, and helps you kind of capture what matters. And what that looks like is, what we found is it's starting to form this new type of inbox, a conversations inbox, where you just throw in every conversation you have, and then after that it's searchable. You can look at the action items, you can share it, you can add collaborators, and so on. And what it looks like, I'm going to take another question. This is a meeting I had with a gentleman. Does anybody have a guess about what this meeting was about? Yes, it was Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. They were raising $20 million. And then what happens after a meeting also is you get a highlight reel. Anything where you give a command to EVA gets captured, transcribed accurately. You get an X-ray, which is a natural language analysis of things that you talked about in case you forgot to give a command or forgot to tap. Anyway, just to give you a summary then. So where are we? We're in this world where we're building an in-meeting AI assistant that's different than Alexa, Cortana, Google, because we're not consumer-focused. We're 100% enterprise-focused and focused on collaboration. So that's what we do. Thank you.
Thanks. So finally, we have Tim McElreath, who's going to talk about how he's at Scripps and runs mobile and emerging platforms, and we're going to hear a little bit about how a media company is thinking about voice, and then we'll all kind of get together and answer some questions.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Tim McElreath. I'm Director of Engineering for Mobile and Emerging Platforms for Scripps Networks. Ooh, man, that's bright. Thank you. So Scripps Networks are the parent company for Food Network, HGTV, Travel Channel, various lifestyle broadcasts. I'm going to talk about Food Network now. We're doing straw polls. How many people out here eat on a regular basis? Good. Not everyone gets to do that, so keep that in mind. How many people out here, just a subset, how many people cook on a regular basis? Okay, fewer hands were in New York. Let me just say, just so you know, our demographic outside of New York tends to cook a little bit more. And what we're working on at Food Network is what we're calling emerging platforms, which are voice, chat, AR, VR. Things that are not a website or a mobile app, and things we don't really know how to make money off of yet, essentially. The thing we find interesting about it is, I'm going to speak specifically around food. Food is actually a really interesting subject to work in, not only because of the practical value. There's a whole lot of emotional baggage that comes around with food. It reflects on our vision of self, it reflects on our health, it reflects on our relationship with our families and our friends. And the way that we interact with food has changed radically over the last 50 years. I mean, if you think about our parents' generation or our grandparents' generation, it's really been mostly passed down orally. It's been written down on index cards and put in boxes. Eventually, with the rise of broadcast television specialty channels like Food Network, it's become an entertainment property, right? So we've taken this information around food and cooking and turned it into storytelling. And we've also turned it into entertainment. We have to fill up a certain number of hours per day, so we've kind of gamified cooking as well. Now, when the web came along in the 90s, we've taken that sort of cookbook paradigm, we've kind of transferred that over to network computers. So now we have access to a much wider range of information that accelerated in the 10 years later when mobile came around. So now here we are, we're back here, we're talking about these new tools that are coming around, which I find fascinating. Now, the thing that fascinates me most is the pivot that I see that's happening with voice, especially, is that the expectation is that the mode of communication is now shifting the burden onto the digital interface and away from us, right? Up until this point, even with mobile interfaces, the expectation is that we have to learn how to talk like the device. You know, my father started programming in 1963. He had to learn how to talk in punch card. Even when we're talking about the web, we had to learn how to manipulate HTML pages. We had to learn how to do forms. We had to learn how to work with apps. These things didn't come naturally to us. What we see with voice communication and some of the natural language interfaces is that now the expectation is that digital interfaces are going to talk like us, and that expectation is going to shift and grow. And that's a fascinating place to be. Where we are right now, we've launched Food Network on a number of different platforms, Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa, Facebook Messenger. We're also doing some AR and VR work. The question that we have now, and I think this is an industry-wide question for these interfaces, is how do you communicate in a way that's effective, that is natural to those interfaces? What I've noticed when modes of communication change is that there's a kind of conceptual skeuomorphism that happens. The skeuomorphism is when you apply a previous paradigm onto a new paradigm, even if it doesn't quite fit. And when I talk to people who are adopting voice and multimodal interfaces, what I hear a lot is that there's a frustration that we're just trying to put the website onto a voice platform, or we're just trying to replicate the mobile app onto a chat platform, and that doesn't quite fit. And that's why we're not quite getting the engagement that we need yet. So the question that I think we're trying to answer, and people are trying to answer across industries, especially when you're trying to deliver a brand voice that's not TV, not mobile app, is how do you take a conversational interface and deliver that content and that value? It's a question I don't think a lot of people have solved yet, but it's a fascinating question. I think it's going to grow over the next few years. How do you talk to your users in a way that feels natural to them and will want them to come back, especially in a subject that's as important and recurring as, you know, how do you make dinner? How do you feed your family? How do you stay healthy? So these are some of the questions that we're trying to answer, and if you have any questions about how we're doing it, feel free to ask. Anyway, thank you very much.
I'll go see. So thanks to all of you for very different angles on voice interfaces. And so what I was hoping to start with is to hear a little bit about why you all are thinking not only why voice, but why now is the right time for voice. And maybe starting even with you, Tim, talking about why this is the moment where Scripps cares about voice.
Is this working? Yeah, okay. We actually have a very forward-thinking product team, and we're very fortunate to have that. That we recognize that these types of interfaces are only going to gain acceptance over the next few years, and I think the reason for that is there's really 3 or 4 factors. One, machine learning has gotten much better, and that includes things like speech recognition, entity resolution, intent discovery, things like that allows us to actually interpret what people say more accurately. Cloud computing has allowed us to, take advantage of all of that, including storage, processing. And then just the equipment has gotten better. Multi-directional microphones, speakers. So the convergence of all of this has kind of I think, made this the moment where this kind of takes off as a consumer device. And I think once this takes hold, the expectation is that these interfaces are going to bleed into every other sort of way device that we communicate with, from TVs to mobile devices to apps to websites, that there is going to be this conversational aspect to all of those interfaces. And we would like to be on those platforms and learn about how to effectively use those platforms as their adoption takes off. So.
I mean, you're at a company that is at the forefront of building the hardware for this. Is that square with how you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, so the technology is getting better. It's undeniable. From machine learning to speech recognition. At Google, we train our speech recognition technology in noisy environments because we're all in noisy environments in our day-to-days. But I think really what's interesting is that the technology is getting better, users are using it more frequently, their expectations are rising, and it's this nice little feedback loop of, well, you have to build out this functionality because that's what the users are asking for, and then it pushes the technology forward. And just as Tim said, these conversational computing is becoming embedded everywhere, from washing machines to refrigerators to those like little robo vacuums that can clean your apartments or your houses if you don't live in Manhattan. And it's engagement via natural language that is becoming the norm. So at Google, we've seen that over 70% of queries are natural language. So we're moving beyond the keyword. That's just even with search, and these digital assistants and all this is just pushing that trend forward.
Yeah, so we really have Google and Alexa to thank for making it possible for people to get used to speaking to an AI at home or all over the place. So we just thought we'd leverage that secular trend to bring it into the enterprise. That's number one. Number two is that meetings are an epidemic, and the problem that we're seeing with meetings is the more time people spend in it, the more they feel tempted to multitask and not be present. So it's really important that you find a way to let people say, no, you can actually have shorter meetings, focus on the people in the conversation. So I think the timing is just right for it.
So you all know we're going to open it up to questions in a moment. I'm going to ask one more, but if you have questions, start to formulate them now. Earlier we were talking about the voice design paradigm and then the notion of multimodal interfaces. And how do you all think about, it seems like there's two camps. There's sort of the pure conversational, only voice, there's no UI. I'm going to kind of divine what the buttons are, might be, what the choices might be. And the other one is sort of this multimodal, you know what, if you happen to have a watch, then we'll be on your watch. If you happen to be in a text message, we'll be in text message. If you happen to be sitting next to your Google Home device, then voice is the easiest way. What's your all design approach on that?
If I could jump in on that, there's something super interesting that happened is we released for meetings, and we found that internal meetings and external meetings were almost opposite in what people wanted. In an internal meeting, you could have it just be voice, it would interact and say something back. External meetings with customers, we actually created something we called silent or quiet EVA. No response back except on screen. And the reason is they just wanted to focus on their customer and have the conversation, and they wanted to give it a command and have it just do it and continue the conversation without any interruption. It was kind of super non-intuitive for us going into it, but that's what we discovered what users wanted. So multimodal was crucial there. And I think that's a consumer kind of walking down the street saying something is very different than someone in a meeting amongst peers, is very different than someone in a meeting amongst a new customer. So I don't expect one type of interaction design to work for everything.
So one thing we've been thinking about is if you're an engineer and you're working in responsive design and you think responsive design is tough now, buckle in. Because essentially if you're talking about designing for a interface that could be voice only or could be voice multimodal, that's really different information you're giving out. So if I'm giving out information voice only, I'm going to be much more explicit about what I say than if I have visual information I'm also giving out. To have an interface, you really want to know the device capabilities that you're talking to, so you can know how much to say and how much to show. Now, there's that, there's also what type of screen you're going to if you are going to a multimodal interface. Are you going to a large screen like a television? Are you going to medium size? There are devices coming out which is a 2.5-inch round screen. So you're going to have to design for circular screens now. And this is only going to spread out. There's going to be a ton of more devices that have these interfaces that you're going to have to make decisions on how you deliver your content. Then there's also environment. You talk to people differently in their home than you would necessarily at work, or one thing I've been thinking about for people who design interfaces for auto. That becomes a safety issue. Like how do you present information to a driver differently than you would somebody in their kitchen now? So, there's going to be a lot of thought that has to go into how you're communicating with people, not just where they are, but what their device capabilities are, what their environment is, and also how much you're showing and how much you're telling. So.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's context. Context is really key here. So think about the user. What are they trying to accomplish? When would they want to talk to you? When can you help them? Personally, I don't want to browse for shoes with my voice. I want to be able to see it. So think about, again, what that exact micro moment or that use case is that's driving this interaction, and then build the appropriate one, whether it's talking or tapping, typing, whatever that interaction model is.
So I want to open it up for a question or two. Do we have any questions here?
Hi guys, Robbie Klein. How do you guys plan to address privacy concerns and user concerns about what exactly you're listening to?
I assume that was just directed immediately at Google.
I don't know. It's all about control. We make it very clear if you've gone through the assistant setup process, what information is being shared. A user can determine to toggle that off if they don't want that information shared. For an in-home device like the Google Home, it lights up when you're speaking to it or when it's listening. You can turn the microphone off and it'll display these yellow-orange buttons to let you know that the microphone is off. So even if you say, okay, Google, which is the wake word, it's not going to actually do anything. But we really think that it's about just transparency of this information and making sure the user is in control of it.
It is interesting that all of the devices have set it up so that the wake words happen locally, right? So they're not constantly pushing out, which if you remember back to that Samsung TV that I think was out for a long time ago, it was listening all the time, and that was a big issue. Do we have time for one more?
Hello. I wonder how Google thinks about assisted with email, considering the rise of Clara and Amy.
So what aspect of assistance in email? So we do have concepts of personalized search. So it understands parts of email. It's based on email markup. It's schema.org markup. And basically what that means is you can type into Google search upcoming trips, my flights, reservations, and you can get that assistance based on things that are in your inbox. But it's not parsing all of your emails. It is a very deliberate action, again, with this concept of email markup to enable that assistance. Is that kind of getting at your question? Or okay, sweet.
We have time for one more question. All right. If we don't have any